Hi, this is Cathy Gnatek. I'm an astrologer from the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And this is the continuation of a series of talks I'm giving at the local Twin Cities Astrology Meetup on planetary dignity. Today, we're talking about detriment and exile. This is the notion that planets, when they're in the sign opposite the sign that they rule, lose a little power. They're like a foreigner in a foreign land. And there's some challenges, but also there's a notion with if you have planets in detriment in your chart, that because they challenge you to think outside the box, be creative, adapt, they can actually help you grow. And this is a common theme in astrology in general. It's the challenging aspects in our chart that create difficulties for us, but at the same time allow us to kind of expand our consciousness and become more of who we're intended to be. So there's a lot to talk about today. And you can also check out my past videos on the planetary dignity of domicile, which means a planet in its own sign gains some power, and exaltation, which planets in certain signs are exalted and held on high, and that gives them power as well. I'll drop links to those below. So yeah, if you enjoy the video, do like and subscribe. I'm hoping to grow my channel and it really helps. I'd appreciate it. And so let me bring up the PowerPoint from yesterday's presentation. Okay, ta-da. I'm going to expand it a little bit to make sure that you can see. So let's start off just doing an overview. I always like to review the basic concepts because there's so much to learn in astrology. So, what is planetary dignity? Well, in Hellenistic astrology, which is the type of astrology I practice, there are two ways you can evaluate how strong a planet is in your chart. One is whether it has essential dignity, the other is whether it has accidental dignity. Essential dignity refers to the inherent strength or weakness of a planet based on its position in the zodiac. It's determined by how well the planet or the nature of the planet aligns with its natural qualities in a given sign. Essential dignity is about the planet's sort of innate power to express its nature clearly and effectively. So we talked about the essential dignity of rulership or domicile a couple of months ago. Again, I dropped a video for you, or excuse me, a link. And there's another idea of exaltation, same thing. Today, we're going to talk about exile or detriment. And next month, we'll talk about the idea of fall. These are all types of essential dignity. But then we also have accidental dignity. I'll begin to cover that a little bit later. Accidental dignity refers to the strength or weakness of a planet based on its position in a specific chart rather than its inherent compatibility with the sign it occupies. So, where we have essential dignity, it's like the example of Venus in Libra does really well because Venus is in her own sign and she's in a sign that fits with her qualities. Venus is the goddess of love and beauty and harmony. And Libra is a sign that's about balance and harmony and people getting along. So there's an essential way in which the innate nature of Venus fits with the sign of Libra. She's going to do well there. But accidental dignity more has to do with the position in the chart. Is it in one of the stronger houses like the the first, seventh, fourth, and 10th are really powerful places in a chart that adds accidental dignity. And then there are these other types of dignity as well. One most people are familiar with is aspects. If you have a really positive aspect, like a trine or a sextile from a positive planet like Jupiter to your sun, that's going to add power to your sun. And so that's a form of accidental dignity. And we get the notions. It's always good to understand that with Hellenistic astrology, it's rooted in this really deep philosophical tradition. It's got a harmony and a beauty to it. And it all comes from this idea of the Thema Mundi, which was the chart of the world, which is a symbolic birth chart from Hellenistic astrology that represents the cosmic order and the ideal structure of the heavens. And in that chart, it always begins with Cancer on the ascendant, which reflects the moon's rulership over the sign and its connection to this nurturing and life-giving qualities of the earth. there's a beauty and a pattern. There's a reason behind the idea of which planets rule which signs. And you can see this reflected in the Thema Mundi. If you want a deeper dive on that, check out my video where we talked about domicile or rulership. I go into that in more detail there. So this is that just a video, excuse me, a slide that shows you which planets rule which signs. The moon rules Cancer, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, Venus rules Taurus, and so on. Again, you can take a deeper dive into that in the domicile video. So we understand what we're talking about today, exile or detriment, by understanding domicile, because basically what it is if a planet is in the sign opposite its own sign, it's in exile. It's far away from home. It's far away from an energy that it understands and comprehends, right? So, for example, the moon rules Cancer, but when it's in the opposite sign from Cancer, which is Capricorn, it's in its detriment and has a little bit of a harder time managing things. It's in a place that doesn't fit with its nature. If you think about the moon, it's about nurturing and mothering and emotions and body. And Capricorn is an earth sign ruled by the planet Saturn, which is about restrictions. Saturn's about restrictions, boundaries, hard work, seriousness. There's got a little bit of a heavy leaden quality. And Capricorn, an earth sign, when it's ruled by Saturn, has this energy of ambition and hard work. And if you think about it, what nurtures us tends not to be hard work and ambition. We're nurtured by comfort and things that make us feel more secure. But somebody who has their moon in Capricorn, what makes them feel safe and nurtured is working really hard. You can see how that's in conflict with our body, right? And our emotions, right? We have less or a less connected feeling toward our own emotions sometimes with the moon in Capricorn. You might have to work a little bit harder to understand your emotions or to connect with them. But at the same time, we're going to see this is the example I use at the end, that moon in Capricorn can develop an authority and a quality of really understanding and an expertise around its emotional territory because it has to work to do that. And that's going to just be part of its edge. So then, exile or detriment. I kind of explained this already, but I'll go ahead and read the slide to give us a deeper dive. Planets in exile or detriment operate in a condition where they are out of their element or placed in a sign opposite of the one they rule. In these positions, the planet is thought to lack access to the resources or qualities that naturally support its expression, making its functions more challenging to fulfill effectively. For example, when Venus is in Taurus or Libra, which is her sign of domicile, it's her home, she thrives, fully expressing her natural qualities of harmony and beauty and connection. When she's in Aries or Scorpio, excuse me, her signs of detriment, she's challenged to adapt to settings that contrast with her nature. Now, this is easy to understand. If you have Venus in the sign of Scorpio, this water sign that's about intensity and transformation and emotional depth, a little bit of darkness, struggling with the desire to survive, among other things. And also it's got a vulnerability to it. You know, Venus wants to chill and have fun. She rules, excuse me, she has her joy in the fifth house of pleasure and fun and creativity. But if she's in this heavy emotional environment of Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars, you know, it's not as much fun, right? So that's the idea behind detriment, or one example. We're going to go through examples for each of the planets. Give me one sec to get a little drink. So, having a planet in detriment is not inherently negative. I'm going to say that over and over again. Having a planet in detriment is not inherently negative, because people can, whenever there's something in our charts that feels like it's not 100% the best thing in the world, we can be like, oh my God, you know, does that mean I'm not going to get the thing I want? Or does that mean there's something wrong with me? We've got a real heavy culture in the West around judging ourselves in a negative way. So take off that judging lens and instead occupy the place of the soul. The soul, the deeper part of who we are, observes without judgment and actually has a very kind ethos to it, a warmth around accepting our humanity. See if you can occupy that space as you think about this idea of detriment. So Demetra George, who's a famous astrologer, has written many books, including a really lengthy two-part series on Hellenistic astrology, highlights that while a planet in domicile operates smoothly and naturally, a planet in detriment is forced to adapt to circumstances, I've already said this, that challenge its essential nature. But this tension can foster inner strength and creative problem solving. Planets in detriment are like strangers in a foreign land, unfamiliar with the customs and out of their element. But it's precisely this discomfort that pushes them to grow, to learn new skills, and develop resilience in the face of adversity. For example, Venus in Aries, which is in its detriment, a Mars ruled sign, struggles with Venusian qualities like harmony and cooperation in the fiery, independent realm of Aries. This placement teaches Venus, the goddess of love, to balance self assertion with relational harmony, leading to a unique expression of bold and passionate love. Detriment placements can build strength through contrast as well. A planet in detriment must learn to work in unfamiliar territory, which can sharpen its skills and create profound growth. When we step outside our comfort zones, we're compelled to develop qualities we might otherwise overlook. This is the gift of detriment. It encourages us to see life through a different lens. For example, Saturn in Cancer, where it's in its detriment, finds itself in the emotional, nurturing world of Cancer, which contrasts with its preference for structure and control. Here, that planet Saturn has to learn how to soften its rigidity, gaining emotional intelligence and the ability to create supportive boundaries. Or Jupiter in Virgo, where it's in its detriment, is forced to focus on details and practicality, rather than the expansive big picture thinking it prefers. As a result, Jupiter learns to ground its vision in reality, combining optimism with precision. Detriment placements can also result in like unique and innovative approaches. The planet cannot rely on its, usual resources, so it has to find new ways to express itself. A planet in detriment, when approached with awareness, can inspire unexpected ingenuity. It shows us that what first seems like a weakness can ultimately become a source of strength. For example, Mercury in Sagittarius, which is a Jupiter ruled sign about the quest and big ideas, can struggle because it likes to be precise and detailed. Mercury prefers that, but in Sagittarius, it like excels at conveying the big idea, at being excited about the idea of being able to explain the vision and explain philosophical truths. And this creates a dynamic and visionary method or way of communicating. The sun in Aquarius, which is in its detriment, operates outside the ego-driven realm of the sun. The sun is the planet that all the other planets revolve around. It's the center and it's admired, and that's what the sun feels comfortable with. But when it's out in Aquarius, which is a sign ruled by Saturn, it has a more detached quality, less about look at me and more at let's understand what the community needs. And so there, instead of focusing on itself, it focuses on collective needs and innovation, resulting in a unique and forward-thinking leadership style. Ooh, losing my words. Okay. So lastly, something that can come with a planet in detriment is the gift of humility, because you're not going to naturally be good necessarily at that thing. So you fall on your face a little bit, you ask forgiveness, and you move forward understanding your limitations. And so it can teach us that notion of humility. Detriment humbles a planet, removing its ease and privilege, yet through this humility, it discovers truth strength, rooted in perseverance, determination, and authenticity. For example, the moon in Capricorn must work to understand and express its emotions in the disciplined and goal-oriented realm of Capricorn. This placement can lead to deep emotional maturity and the ability to channel feelings into constructive achievements. Or Venus in Scorpio, where she's in her detriment, dives into the emotional depths of relationships, learning to navigate intensity and vulnerability, which can result in profound emotional resilience and transformative love. So let's get down to examples. We already talked about the sun in Aquarius, so we'll move forward because that's one of the examples I already gave. But then let's move on to the moon in Capricorn. Oh, I actually talked about this a little bit too, but I'll go ahead and repeat it because it's in my chart and it's what I'm really familiar with. And it's the example we're going to use at the end a little bit to go deeper. In Capricorn, the moon is in detriment, challenged by Capricorn's focus on discipline and practicality and ambition, which contrasts with the desire for emotional fluidity. You know, the moon likes to change and be changeable, not be under the constraint of Saturn, which restricts it and contains it. Here in Capricorn, the moon finds stability through resilience and hard work, often prioritizing responsibilities over emotional expression. While this placement may feel restrictive, it fosters emotional strength and maturity, teaching the moon to value reliability and long-term stability over immediate gratification. And then Mercury. So the moon and the sun only rule one sign. The moon rules Cancer. The sun rules Leo, of course. All the other planets rule two signs. So they're going to be in their detriment in two different signs. So with Mercury, it rules, Gemini, which is the sign opposite Sagittarius, and it rules Virgo, which is the sign opposite Pisces. When Mercury is in Gemini or Virgo, it's a sign of domicile. It excels at in environments that align with its natural strengths. So again, this is the idea of essential dignity. You're in a sign that fits with who you are. So the natural strengths of Mercury are curiosity, logic, and communication. In Gemini, Mercury's quick and adaptable. It's an air sign, and it's a mutable sign, so it has this flexibility about it. And so there, Mercury thrives on gathering and sharing information. In Virgo, it's an earth sign, and it becomes analytical and precise, organizing and refining details with skill. In both signs, Mercury operates at its peak capacity, navigating thought and language with clarity. But when Mercury is in Sagittarius or Pisces, Jupiter ruled signs. Jupiter is big, expansive, optimistic, hubristic energy. Mercury has a little bit more difficult time because Jupiter wants to find the big answer. Mercury likes details. In Sagittarius, Mercury shifts its focus from details to big picture ideas, excelling in expansive, inspiring communication. In Pisces, a water sign that's about faith and compassion, it's also ruled by Jupiter. It's got a flexible, mutable energy. In Pisces, Mercury moves from logic to intuition, favoring creativity and empathy over direct reasoning. The example I always give is my son has his Mercury in Pisces opposite my Mercury in Virgo. And I still remember when he was about 5 years old, we're walking down the street and I'm like, we got to get this thing done. And he's like, hey, Mom, can we stop? Look at those beautiful flowers. I mean, literally, like slow down, pay attention to the beauty of the earth and the beauty of life itself. That can be Mercury in Pisces. It can also be very poetic. Mercury is about how we communicate. So people with Mercury in Pisces can have a poetic way of expressing themselves. And that can be just beautiful. We need the poets of the world, not just the astrologers, for sure. Okay, so Venus rules Libra, which is the sign opposite Aries, and she also rules, oh my gosh, Taurus, the sign opposite Scorpio. When Venus is in Taurus or Libra, which is her home sign, she thrives, because again, it resonates with her nature. She's allowed to fully express her natural qualities of harmony, beauty, and connection, create art, beautiful speech, diplomacy. That's the vibe of Libra and Taurus. But when Venus is in Aries or Scorpio, it's the sign of her detriment, and she's challenged to adapt to settings that contrast with her inherent nature. In Aries, she must embrace assertiveness and independence. We talked about that already, focusing on passion and action over ease and harmony. In Scorpio, she delves into emotional depth and transformation, navigating intensity and vulnerability rather than lightness and simplicity. While these placements may feel uncomfortable, they encourage Venus to grow through boldness, emotional resilience, and profound connection. Then we move on. Mars rules the sign of Scorpio, which is opposite Taurus, and he rules the sign of Aries, which is opposite Libra. So he's in his detriment in Taurus and Libra. When Mars is in its home signs of Aries and Scorpio, it thrives by fully expressing its natural qualities of energy, drive, courage, assertiveness, conflict even. In Aries, Mars embodies courage, initiative, and bold action. It's a fire sign. It's a cardinal sign. It likes to start things, and Mars does really well there. It it excels in direct, decisive efforts. Can also be a little athletic, right? Because Mars can represent the athlete, you know. In Scorpio, Mars channels its intensity into strategy, determination, this survival instinct, this stick-to-itiveness, this perseverance of Scorpio energy. It also likes to transform things. It's got an alchemical quality, Scorpio, and it achieves its goals through focus and emotional depth. In both signs, Mars operates at its strongest, demonstrating passion, resilience, and power. Just one more little thing I always like to say. I love to compare the signs of Aries and Scorpio. I remember hearing this in the astrology podcast one time, and I was like, oh, this is really true. In Aries is the sign where, if you wanted to give an example or contrast them, it's as if you have the prize fighter who gets a knockout in the first round, one and done. It's that quick, fiery energy that likes to start things. Whereas Scorpio is the prize fighter who goes 15 rounds, gets all bloodied up, and wins in the end. It's got this stick-to-itiveness, I will prevail ultimately, even though it's really difficult. So that really gives you the vibe of the Scorpio energy. I'm a Scorpio rising, really resonated with that way of describing those signs. So moving on to the idea of detriment. In Taurus or Libra, in signs of its detriment, Mars is challenged to adapt to settings that contrast with its forceful nature. In Taurus, which is a fixed energy earth sign that loves luxury and comfort and financial stability, Mars has to slow down, channeling its energy into persistence and practicality. It's an earth sign. All earth signs have a pragmatic quality. And in Taurus, it has to prioritize steady progress over impulsive action. Whereas in Libra, Mars, the air sign ruled by Venus, the goddess of love, Mars is tasked with diplomacy and balance. It's like having the warrior in the sign of the diplomat. That's kind of hard. So you have to change that warrior energy or adapt and find ways to use your yang masculine energy to get consensus and agreement and ensure all sides are heard. While these placements may feel restrictive, they encourage Mars to grow through patience, compromise, and deliberate effort, slowing down the impulsivity of that Mars energy. And then we have Jupiter, which rules Sagittarius, the sign opposite Gemini, and Pisces, the sign opposite Virgo. So it's in its detriment in Gemini and Virgo. When Jupiter's in Sagittarius or Pisces, the sign of its domicile, it thrives by expressing its natural traits of expansion and wisdom and faith and abundance. In Sagittarius, it excels at philosophy and adventure, inspiring growth through big ideas. In Pisces, it channels compassion and spirituality, fostering emotional connection and imagination. Jupiter operates at its best here, offering hope and vision. But when Jupiter is put into Gemini or Virgo, these Mercury ruled, detail oriented kind of signs, it has to adapt to practicality and detail, which contrasts with this expansive nature. It finds meaning and logic because Jupiter loves the idea of meaning through communication, right? Because Mercury is the messenger to the gods. He was Hermes in the Greek pantheon, and it's about sharing information. In Virgo, it focuses on service and precision, growing through humility and grounded effort despite the challenges. And then we move on to Saturn, where Saturn rules the signs opposite of Cancer and Leo. Saturn rules Capricorn, the sign opposite Cancer, and it rules Aquarius, the sign opposite Leo. So it's in its detriment in these signs of Cancer and Leo. When Saturn's in Capricorn or Aquarius, it's at home and it thrives by expressing discipline, structure, responsibility, hard work, right? In Capricorn, Saturn excels in ambition and persistence, building lasting through success through hard work. Capricorn's an earth sign, and so it's about building things. That's why it can relate to ambition. It's a cardinal energy. It likes to start things. And with Saturn ruling it, it's going to do it through hard work and discipline. And then in Aquarius, Saturn focuses on innovation and social order, creating structures using that boundary idea of what Saturn energy is to create structures that benefit the collective. Aquarius is very much a sign that's about the greater good of humanity. In both signs, Saturn operates at its best, showing strength, wisdom, and authority. In Cancer or Leo, at the signs of its detriment, Saturn struggles to adapt to environments emphasizing emotion, Cancer, or self expression, Leo, and those contrast with its sort of more reserved nature. In Cancer, it must balance sensitivity with discipline, while in Leo, it learns to lead with humility, the opposite of Leo, which is just like, hey, I'm going to own myself. I'm going to be on stage and I'm going to lead everyone, and people will follow. It loses a little bit of that natural sense of everybody's going to follow and needs to be maybe defer to the collective a little more in its leadership style. So that's the last. We think we covered them all. It was a lot. And then I just wanted to, I always like to give a little bit of tools for reflection and an activity. I believe that astrology is best when we use it to reflect on our own charts as opposed to thinking somebody else can tell us the meaning of what our own soul, our inner knowing is, right? Astrology helps affirm our inner knowing. But it's always about finding our own inner guidance ultimately. So I'm giving you here on the right a description of all the house meetings. Can always take a screenshot of that and save it for yourself. When I put these house meetings up here, hold it lightly because these are some of the topic areas, the major ones associated with each house. But with astrology, we don't want to be reductive and say, every time something is happening with the seventh house, it means it's about our marital relationship, or everything time something's happening in the 10th house, it's about our career. We can expand the ideas to of the 10th house to have to do with our karma, our actions out in the world. So we want to open up the meanings in astrology, not close them down into definitions that are restrictive and don't allow for the creative inner understanding to come forth. That's my little lecture. Anyway, it's good to get a basic idea of the topics of each of the houses. That's what this chart or this figure on the right shows you. And then the example that I wanted to show, because in addition, now this is a little more advanced, in addition to understanding that somebody with the moon in Capricorn may have some difficulty or may work or gain experience about their own emotions, that's going to be their edge in life, and then eventually they develop some maturity around, or maybe even greater skill around understanding and articulating emotions than other people might have because they've had to work at it. We can look at that, but we can take a deeper look at the chart. This is actually my chart. I'm just open to sharing it because It's the chart I know the best. And sometimes the best examples come from our own life. And so, if you want to look more deeply at the meaning of the moon, if it's in Capricorn in your chart, you can understand that it's going to, for somebody, for example, has their moon in the third house. The third house is actually where the moon has its joy. It's a house that can have to do with intuition. It's the house of the goddess. It can also be about communication and, of course, siblings and short trips and schools and all these other ideas. But we might understand somebody with the moon in Capricorn here is going to become adept at communicating around intuitive concepts like tarot. Tarot belongs to the third house astrology, the ninth house, and I actually work with both tarot and astrology. I weave tarot into my astrology. So you can kind of just see that by the fact that my moon is here because it gives me emotional sustenance to work with both energies. I say that because the moon is in the third house, but it rules the ninth house, rules Cancer. So this is where, if you begin to really get an understanding of the idea of rulership from the first video I did. If you come to know what house each planet rules, you can see how that planet is going to connect to more than one topic area of your life. So that's just a little bit of additional information. So the last slide, let me recenter that. It decided it wanted to go off. The last slide I have is a little exercise you can participate in, and feel free to drop me a comment if you do look at your own chart and try to get an understanding of where a planet is in detriment and what it might mean for you. Feel free to drop a comment. I'm happy to respond as best as I can. So you can say, okay, you can ask yourself, do I have any planets in detriment in my chart? You can look really quickly. You can find a copy of your chart if you don't have it. I'll also drop a link to my video on how to pull up your birth chart on AstroSeek. You pull the chart up, there'll be a key there. You're going to be able to identify the planets and see what house they're in. So first, see if you have any planets in detriment in your chart. That's the easiest. And you can always, that might be where you stop because you're at a beginner level of astrology. But if you're moving forward a little bit, you're more at an intermediate level. You might also ask, what house does that planet sit in? What topic? For example, if your Jupiter's in Virgo in the third house, it's going to have a certain meaning. You might work a little bit harder around sibling issues, around your intuition, creating it to that Virgoan analysis. But then Jupiter's going to bring perhaps a little of abundance around that analysis, as well as a little bit of having to contain and frame ideas, your big expansive ideas, in an analytical way. So you can just reflect on what that might mean for you going back to those past slides. But then you can also look at Jupiter and understand that it has to work a little bit harder and say, okay, what houses does it rule? And if you know that Jupiter rules Pisces, the ninth house, and Jupiter rules Sagittarius, the sixth house, you're going to understand also that you might have to work a little bit harder or gain a little bit of wisdom in the areas of sixth house, which can have to do with our powerlessness, with our with health, with areas where we have to submit. It's kind of the house of the everyday worker, like Dilbert. So you might have challenges in that area of life containing your abundant energy, right? And figuring out what that is for you. You might also have challenges and also potential for growth around ninth house topics because Jupiter rules Pisces. Ninth house is everything from international travel to astrology to religion, philosophy, higher education, all these things that expand our consciousness. So for somebody that could look like maybe you wanted to go to college, but it was something that was difficult for you, that you really had to work hard because ninth house can relate to college degrees. You had to work hard, but you learned something in the process of having to commit yourself to that. So you can think about that for you. Yeah, so I think that's a good exercise. And again, feel free to share whatever the results of your exploration are. I love to hear from you. And again, like and subscribe if you've watched the video and you've enjoyed it. I really love that. So I'll see you all in about a month when we talk about the idea of fall, when a planet is in fall in your chart. Have a great day.